Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and a very good morning to all of you. Distinguished delegates, speakers and participants from SAARC member states, ladies and gentlemen. I am very thankful to all of you for joining us in this online training. My name is Lng Javed and I am working as a research fellow renewable energy at SAARC Energy Center, Islamabad. I shall be moderating this training, which will be broadcasted daily starting from today till Friday 19th November from 10 to 12:30 hours. I am grateful to our elite panel of experts such as Dr. A.K. Balian, Mr. Rajiv Mathur, Mr. R.K. Garg, and Mr. Swami Dayal Prasad for their enthusiasm and eager willingness to participate in this training. With this, now I may like to request Dr. Tanveer Ahmed, who is the Deputy Director of SAARC Energy Center, to give his opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Hassan. Good morning and welcome everyone. I'm here for these opening remarks on behalf of Director SEC, Dr. Nawaz Ahmed Wade, who unfortunately could not join us due to his busy schedule. So, ladies and gentlemen, SAARC region represents nearly 25% of the world's population, and energy security is an important agenda for prosperity of South Asian region. Recognizing the growing importance and role of LNG in the overall energy sector of SAARC member states, SAARC Energy Center has organized this online training program. During recent past, there has been an increasing focus globally as well as in the SAARC member states on the use of LNG to meet energy needs in a sustainable and relatively cleaner way. Recently, the efforts are being made by member states to acquire supplies of natural gas from outside the region through pipelines and in the form of LNG. Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan are already LNG importing countries. Member states such as Sri Lanka is also planning and considering option of importing LNG in the near future. Due to the complex geopolitical nature of LNG sourcing and long-term nature of LNG transactions between buyers and sellers, it is commercially prudent for those involved in this process to know the global LNG supply and market conditions, available methodologies for price determination, contract structures, and negotiations techniques. Dear participants, the Center has organized this training for capacity building of professionals in the SAARC region in the evolving and dynamic LNG sector. In this training, we have engaged experts from India who will deliver presentations and conduct interactive discussions on various aspects of LNG sector. The training will focus on supply chain, including but not limited to fundamentals of LNG, global markets and trade, supply chain LNG procurement, sales and purchase agreements, commercial and legal aspects of the LNG sector. It is hoped that this training shall help professionals to expand their technical and business knowledge in the entire LNG value chain. In the end, I thank you all for joining this training. I expect this event to be an interactive session, so please feel free to join the discussion and express your valuable opinions. With these words, I declare the session open and wish you all a very comfortable learning and knowledge sharing experience. Now I request Mr. Lng Javed to take us through the agenda. Over to you, Hassan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tanveer. So now I would formally start the day's session. So first we have a presentation of introductory overview of the program. The presentation includes overview of energy consumption in global/SAARC region, importance of natural gas in the energy mix, dependence on LNG, complexities and nuances, and introduce the subsequent sessions of the overall training. So this session would take 1 hour and it will be delivered by Dr. A.K. Balian. We have already shared the trainer's profile with all the participants, but I would like to just say a few words about Dr. Balian. Dr. Balian, the lead trainer, has over 40 years rich experience in the oil and gas sector. He has done his MTech from the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and PhD from Technische Hochschule for Chemie, Merseburg, Germany. Currently, he is the chairman and director Carmen Energy Singapore and advises on LNG terminal developments. So, Dr. Balian, I would like to ask you to start your presentation.
Sir, unmute yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Hasan sir. I just try to set my this screen back on the side. Yeah. Well, once again, good morning to all the participants. On behalf of this training faculty, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome all the participants, delegates from the SAARC countries. We would like to convey our sincere thanks to the SAARC Energy Center, particularly Shri Ehsan Javed, Dr. Tanveer Ahmed, and Dr. Nawaz Ahmed, the director of the SAARC Center, for coordinating, planning, and very professionally organizing this LNG business strategies program. Our compliments to them and to the SAARC Energy Center. A brief profile of the all faculty members is already shared with you, and I think the faculty has tremendous experience in their respective fields, very, very specialized areas of the LNG business. We sincerely hope that this program would be beneficial to all the participants and would add some value. Our efforts would be to make it more interactive, and I would urge that all participants to please feel free to interact and ask questions with the faculty whenever they wish to do that. Minimum, can do that. How loud? Drive it here. Go to the room. Yeah. Can I say this? Can you all see the presentation now?
Yes.
Well, this is my overall contents of my presentation. I'll be touching upon all aspects of the LNG business, and many of these aspects will be dealt with in detail by other faculty members in the subsequent sessions of the program. So when we talk about energy, we all know that the energy is essential for life and for all living organisms. We must also note that the sun directly or indirectly is the source of all energy that is available on the earth. Our energy choices and decisions pertaining to energy have a great impact on Earth's natural system in many ways, and some of them we may not be really aware of. It is therefore very, very important, essential, that we choose our energy sources carefully, and this aspect was never so prominent and important as it is now. We need to keep in mind that the true cost of energy, I'm going to really emphasize on that, the true cost of energy is more than just the dollars and cents, the money, because one needs to take into consideration the consequences of choosing an energy source, as it has a strong economic, political, and social environment factors attached to it. So the use of energy and resources cannot be seen in isolation. We must also know and understand that the energy cannot be consumed. It just transforms into other forms, other states, or even objects on that. We have seen that over a period of time, the humanity has really utilized several types of energy sources, starting from the early period of 1800s, where the biomass was the most important thing, and then came from 1900, the century, when the coal and oil became the major source of energy for everyone in the world. But the new modern energy systems and industry evolved from 1950, when we saw a very rapid Western living standards getting really enhanced, and a large amount of energy was consumed. So if you see the CAGR, the the annual rate of growth, this 1950 onwards is the highest, when 2.9% of the energy was consumed here. And we see a different phase now, where we see that from 2015 onwards, while the GDP is doubling, the energy only grows for about 14-15%. So we see for the first time two phenomena, that the growth of energy consumption is decreasing, as also there is no direct linkage between the energy demand and the economic growth. It has become slower. It is decreasing the rate of energy demand. So what are the emerging issues? That we see that more consumption of energy, particularly the fossil fuels. We must emphasize coal, oil, and even gas sometimes. The global warming, climate change, and health hazards have come into fore. The humanity is really facing these problems. There is also a huge disparity between the energy consumption in the developed countries and the developing nations. And also at the same time, the cost of new technologies, their equipment, the know-how is expensive and is remaining within the technological, intellectual properties, the developed countries, and maybe certain multinationals particularly. We see the impact here, just to share on this thing, how the difference of this air pollution has caused in the advanced economies and the developing nations. While the advanced economies have the minimal problems of mortality, but the emerging and developing economies have very large number of this thing. If you see here, the emerging this thing, 3 million deaths compared to the advanced economy where it is 0.4. So I think it is a direct linkage of health to the environmental issues like air pollution. So what all is being done in terms of the global initiatives? Many of the companies globally have come together under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The earliest initiative was 1992, when they called up an Earth Summit and to really debated on the issue, how do you really control the climate change? In 2015 was a major thing where the Conference of Parties, we call it COP, and which was in Paris, and we talk about the recently concluded COP there in Glasgow. So the consensus arrived, and with a large number of countries, 196 came together, that the increasing temperature because of the air pollution, greenhouse gases, and many other pollutions need to be contained. Otherwise, we are not able to really control in the future. So they agreed that the temperature rise should be contained within 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we should do all other things pertaining to our goals, our policies, our plans, and particularly focusing on the developmental plans, as also on the energy consumption, choice of energy, to keep it below that. Also, the United Nations came out with what we call sustainability goals. And there are 3 important sustainability goals which are directly linked to the energy and health. And they're very important. And I think most of the countries have taken note of that, and they're adopting the recommendations of these strategic sustainable development goals into their all policies, plans, particularly for energy consumptions and energy planning. First is the sustainable goal number 3, which talks about good health and well-being, which is so linked to the energy consumption, pollution, and other things. Then the 7th sustainable goal, which calls for that everyone in the country, in the world actually, should have access to clean and affordable energy. Now, how far we have been able to do that, we have to see from country to country, varies, but we've yet to really reach that level that is desired. Then the climate change, the sort of actions on to really see that the minimal effect on the climate is the sustainable goal 13th, which calls for containing the temperature growth and the pollutions of that. And I'm happy that most of the countries have taken note of that, and I think this is good for the overall humanity. When you talk about the future of energy as to how it's going to grow, there are several initiatives that are taken to really look at how the energy consumptions are going to be there, how the developments will be taken there. So when you predict, then you have to assume certain parameters, and therefore several organizations, companies, federations undertake energy scenarios. They develop energy scenarios using predictive tools, analytical tools, even artificial intelligence and all that they can put together to really come out with the most likely scenario in the future as to how the energy consumption trends would be there. They talk to a lot of energy consumers, energy producers, engineering companies, planners, town planners, all across the sectors of the society to really come out with their recommendations of how this will go. Like some of the key inputs for these scenario buildings are mapping the economic and demographic factors. What is the GDP growth? How much population? What is the rate of consumption, per capita consumption of income, energy, all the things? What are the prices of all types of energy sources? What is the technology? Are the countries using innovative ways, or how they are deployed? What are the cost structure? How much is the government control on that? All those things are there, and very importantly, what are the initiatives on the reduction of carbon footprints? I think these energy scenarios are very important, and they guide us. They give us a glimpse into how these companies, organizations, countries are using it, and overall in the global level, how the energy mix is changing, how the technologies are changing, and what a country, organization can do to really adopt the best practices in that. Now, these energy scenarios are not really very definitive that they would really be like that, but they are scenarios which are most likely scenarios. So they are fraught with some variations, and the good part is that larger number of these kind of scenarios have a convergence on many of these issues. So they are likely, there may be a difference of that, whether the energy decline happens in a particular year or after 2 years, but then largely they give a direction, and that direction is very important for all of us to really understand as to how we should be planning that. And some of the most popular, important that are seen as a guiding principles are the World Energy Outlook by International Energy Agency. We have World Energy Council, we have Greenpeace Energy, and there are a lot of organizations which we really follow, and many other things like Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, DNV, Shell, Wukanzi. Some of the companies we know have been doing it scenario planning for a long time, and this helps in that preparedness of the organizations also to respond quickly to these required changes in their energy mix or approach towards energy in the future. Now, coming to what is happening and what are the projections. One of the projections has very clearly pointed out that two things. Number one, that the energy mix around 2050 would be comprising of approximately 50-50 of the fossil fuels and 50% of the non-fossil renewable cleaner sources of energy. So this is a kind of thing where most of these scenarios are coming to that similar conclusion. So it's a welcome sign that by 2050 the energy mix world globally would have 50-50 kind of a ratio with a cleaner non-fossil fuels. Whether this is sufficient to really address the issues of climate change and air pollution, that is debatable, because we feel that this is still not sufficient to really move that. Also, we see that the energy decline in the overall reduction of the energy consumption from 2030 around onwards, that time, there is a decrease in the primary energy consumption. So there are efficiency factors coming in. There are many other factors coming into this, where overall global energy consumption is also decreasing. So there's a very significant kind of thing on that. We also feel that the recent pandemic, we see this dip here in that graph, actually caused a reduction in the consumption of the primary energy. And we feel that the pre-pandemic levels of energy consumption can come only around 22, 23 on that. And I think this is a very good way forward that gives us some trend on that, and how the companies, organizations, countries would really work on that, to work on non-fossil fuel energy sources or fossil fuels. Now, this is a little complex slide, so many things here, but a very important, very interesting thing here actually. Now, if you see, I'd like to point out here, many energy sources have attained peaks and are now declining as the primary energy source at that point in time. So coal, for example, in 2014 attained a peak, and now the consumption is getting down and down. 26, we have somewhere here. Gas overtakes oil here. So it's very important. Gas overtakes oil as a major energy source worldwide. And if you see this green part is how the cleaner non-fossil composition portion of the energy is increasing in the world on that. We have 2032 here, where the primary energy supply peak is there. After that, the demand is decreasing actually, very important. And then we have the peak final energy demand 2034 here. And then we see in 2035, the natural gas requirement peaks here. So very important analysis trends that have been worked out on a very extensive, exhaustive study by DNV, and gives us a peek into what's all happening or likely to happen. It may vary from other slightly, but there's a trend on that. There's an indicative trend, and I think we need to be conscious of that. 2037, the nuclear energy peaks and then it starts declining. 2039, if you see here, in the sea trade, where the coal was till now the maximum transportation requirement by sea route, gas takes over the coal. Very significant changes. 2039, if you see, yeah, this happens there. And 2050 here, we see about energy mix non-fossil about 46%. So very important changes. And then countries, depending upon their policies, planning, adjust to new energy mix. And this is we call transition. Every country world over, every organization is looking at transitioning to a new energy mix, which is suitable, which addresses the issues of climate change and air pollutions, and is in line with the overall guidelines of the strategic sustainable goals, as also the UN framework on the climate change. Now, if you see here, important point, this is how the specific energy components would change from 2019, 30, 2040, and 2050. Notable here is, you see that wind, which is in 2019 is just about 1% globally, goes to 14%. Solar, which is again just 1% globally, goes to 14%. And the coal from 27% seen as a most polluting energy source gets reduced to 9%. Oil, 29% gets reduced to 16%. But important thing is that you need to note is that natural gas, which constitutes about 26% in the primary energy in 2019, is more or less similar, remains similar by 2050, just by marginally reducing to 24%. So that's very significant. And we see that gas, therefore, plays a very important role in the energy mix and in the overall issues of climate change and air pollution in coming time for decades to come, actually. Now, coming specifically to this thing, just see the change, significant change, 2019 to 2015, huge change. Same as here for solar, huge change. Hydropower, of course, there's not much of, most of the countries have tried to really utilize the potential of hydropower. And there is, of course, some increase, but most of the countries have tried to maximize that. This is one of the cleanest and perhaps also cheapest form of the energy. Bioenergy has also increased. So significant is, as I said, natural gas has a minimal impact over the decades, and it continues to be one preferred energy source in the overall primary mix of the energy sources. But here, oil gets reduced and coal most significantly. And rightly so, because coal is seen as the most polluting one right now. And there are, of course, attempts in countries which have more coal deposits to use cleaner coal technologies to see how you can make coal more greener in their use and reduce the pollution. Some of the trends, if you see now, many countries have said that what initiatives they would take to really address the energy-related pollution issues on that. So some of the countries have stated that they would do this, several policies, but they are not significant. So they say that this has hardly any impact on the fossil fuels. They remain more or less similar, very small kind of a reduction. But yes, there is a significant enhancement of the non-fossil. So most of the newer energy sources are depending upon non-fossil. But some of the countries have really pledged that they will do much more, and there it is. What is significant that there is a definitely reduction of the polluting fossil fuels, as also increase in the cleaner non-fossil fuel energy sector. But when we compare it to what should be the target, the net zero emissions, we are far away from there. And therefore, we need to really look backwards to us and introspect what all can be done to really achieve the targets of net zero emissions. This is the interesting study done by McKinsey, and I thought I'll share with you on that. Now here, this is the dotted line, which shows, which indicates that this is a desired targeted path, that if we are able to restrict the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees pathway, then we would be able to achieve it significant levels by 2050. But if you see the reference, which is the present this thing, we are far away. We are over 90% away from our target. Very, very difficult to really achieve that. Even if there is a increased accelerated transition where some of the countries have really pledged many other things, we are still far away from there. So I think we need to really undertake accelerated transition and continue this. This is in line with the desired thing: faster electrification, more renewable policy support for climate change, low carbon technologies, induction. All these are required to really be followed. If we don't do that, we are far away. And also we should see that the money allocation globally for attaining this thing is all exhausted by 2030. So we need fresh commitments. And we are happy to really hear some of the positives that have come out of the COP recently concluded at Glasgow, where they've perhaps agreed for fresh funding. And also many countries have come up with net zero emissions targets. And I think this is going to be perhaps a more accelerated step towards 1.5 degrees limit. So what all is happening, if you want to summarize that in the energy transition, the few points here to really capitulate everything on that. There's a pressure which is mounting on emissions, and which are still very high till mid-30s, and therefore everything need to be really seen how to really control and limit the emissions. Number two, decarbonation, carbonization is on the agenda. It's very, very important. It's gained so important that all industry and government are really working on that, but not at the pace or depth just to meet the commitments of the Paris Agreement. We are still far away from there. Another development which is seen as an emerging trend of all energy transition is the importance of hydrogen and carbon capture and storage technologies that have shown potential to really transform the entire energy industry. Also, the world is slowly moving, very, very clearly moving from more oil to cheapest oil as demand is declining from maybe 2030, 32 or so. We have seen multiple energy transition in the future, in the past also, like from biomass to coal to oil. So these are multiple energy transition which are happening right now much rapidly, actually, from coal to oil to natural gas, and from fossil fuels to renewable, and now to a decarbonized gas. Under these circumstances, we feel that in all scenarios, gas and LNG particularly is set to thrive as one of the strong energy source in the developing and strong gas market world. Now, role of this thing, many of course experts have said that natural gas is only a bridge for a long time, and then will transform from the coal, oil to perhaps a decarbonized, sustainable energy world in coming in 2050s and that. But we feel that there are strong recommendations and strong sentiments that gas may not be really a bridge gas, but may be there for a long time. And then a transition from gas to other energy sources, hydrogen and all, is going to take time. And large investments in infrastructure, production costs are very high for new energy sources. And that makes that use of gas as destination rather than just as a bridge energy source. So we are important on this, and therefore we need to really see how gas is really going to play an important role as an energy source, a major energy source up to next 4 or 5 decades. Natural gas is not seen as most viable also because of certain things, because of the momentum of the renewable gas and renewable energy. Also, there is an initiative that and a need that whether we can really decarbonize gas itself. And there's a lot of work being done on capturing and storage of carbon dioxide. If we are able to do it commercially at affordable cost, I think then we are in for really natural gas emerging. And let us also be very clear that these scenarios are for next 30 years. And anything that happens in between 13 years, like pandemic or any other major disruptions, can really make the changes in the trends of consumption. So we should always be dynamic in really reassessing our trends on that. So I think gas ultimately is very important, would remain a very important energy source, a sustainable source, and therefore not just a bridge between the fossil and the renewable, but also maybe as a destination for a long time to come. Another study where the world has been divided to 10 different segments, energy segments. They have very specific features about their energy production, consumption, and trends. These different 10 colors show those segments, and the circles in between show that whether they are share of the fossil or the non-fossil, how it will change. If you see the North America, they show that the share of fossil primary energy would be larger by 2050. This is so because they are largely driven by a gas-based economy. They have really, so it is of course natural gas, it's a fossil this thing, but then it is much cleaner here. So it's very different compared to, if you see the Russian part here, they are dominantly dependent on oil and gas, and their revenues come from there. And of course, they're lagging behind in terms of decarbonization and many other clean energy kind of this thing. Let us focus on the Asia and the SAARC nation. So Asia again, we see, we'll come to this thing just to say that this part again is a fossil fuel dominant region, this Southeast Asia, where crude oil and gas constitute the major part of the energy sources and would continue to do for a long time. However, the OCD, the Pacific Australian region, they are slightly different. Their falling population, their importance on and emphasis on energy efficiencies mix is changing, and fossil is lesser. They, of course, are one of the major producers of gas as well on that. So do we have, if gas is going to be there as a prominent major energy source for decades to come, will the world be able to sustain the gas requirement? Well, the reserves, as the show, have been always increasing. Major discoveries in oil and gas are gas discoveries there. And if you see between 1999 to 2019, the reserves have grown from 132 trillion cubic meters to almost about 200 trillion cubic meters. One of the recent studies by an American company has said that with the present rate of consumption, they have gas reserves for over 230 years. So we are comfortable. That gives us comfort that, well, the world has enough gas reserves to really meet the gas requirement of the world in coming decades. Some of the major reserves and producing countries here, Russia, Iran, Qatar, of course, are major countries which have huge reserves and production. Some of the areas they have even not explored. So huge reserves are available, and I think we are all set. We are happy that the world has enough gas resources and producers. So coming to SAARC especially, now if you see SAARC, we are one of the most populated region, certainly on that. And we feel that by 2050, another 500 million people, more people would be joining our population. Although the GDP is growing fourfold during this thing, but the energy demand is definitely growing. We are not that developed, and therefore the aspiration to develop by the people really makes that the energy requirements are going to grow much faster here. One of the important things that has come out here is that despite this rapid growth of renewables and fossil energy will still grow and represent 62% of the energy mix in 2050. So I think we are going to be for a long time major consumer of coal and oil, and this trend is coming here. Although we also have, of course, good reserves of the coal, so it's natural that we use it. But I think maybe during this period, some new clean coal technologies will also come up. But this is a kind of indication there. Another important thing and heartening thing is that most of in the renewable energy and electrification of automotive part, we see a 2- and 3-wheeler fleet will largely transition to e-mobility, to electricity. This is definitely a very important and very positive development that they say that by 2040, practically all 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers will be run by electricity. Good change. Another features about these 1.5 billion people that live in region, more to join. This amounts to about 24% of the population. We are poor nations in this area. We lack access to affordable energy, which restricts the growth. Affordable as per SDG, the Sustainable Goal, we are not able to really have that. Some of the countries in the SAARC region have very high energy costs actually. Predominantly fossil fuels dependent region. Coal for India and Pakistan, Bangladesh perhaps relies more on gas. They have their own gas here. Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka do not produce any hydrocarbons. Maldives imports all its energy requirements. So there is an energy deficit region here. And therefore, there is a need to have some energy cooperation in this area. This would perhaps augur well for this region. In per capita consumption, if you see, we are very low. All the countries are in the very low consumption per capita region. And when we compare with some of the developed countries, USA, Canada, oh, even 1/10, less than a tenth of that. So while we are energy deficient, but the growth rates are coming very high, and that means our energy requirement is going to go very high, and therefore very important that we choose the right energy mix here and make plans and policies to support that. Energy consumption and outlook, there seems to be really good growth there, almost doubling by 2030 here. So I think very rapid growth in this area, and therefore it's important that we keep on looking at our cleaner energy sources. Coming to natural gas, then, what is natural gas and why it is important on that? Now, natural gas, the lowest hydrocarbon, they are hydrocarbons. That means they have hydrogen and carbon as their main constituents. And the lowest molecule is methane. These are odorless, colorless, and non-toxic. They're available in abundance, as we saw that there are large reserves available in the world. The major countries who have good reserves, and assumptions are that we have enough for years to come, for decades, maybe century. It is a versatile fuel. It is used for heating, cooking, electricity, for all kinds of purposes at home or in the industry. It is the cleanest burning hydrocarbon. It produces half the carbon dioxide and 1/10 of the pollutants compared to coal, and therefore is definitely a preferred fuel to reduce emissions. If you see, if compare here, one of the studies done in a automotive, this thing, if you compare petrol, diesel, LPG, and LNG or natural gas here on the kind of particles per 100 kilometers, you see that this is definitely very clean in all aspects. Particulate matter, unburnt also, SOx, NOx, everywhere natural gas and LNG, liquefied natural gas, they are definitely the preferred this thing. They're very clean gas. As of now, the cleanest hydrocarbon fossil fuel available on the world. Now, if you see again, so anthracite, coal, coal lignite, coal bitumen, so all put together, this is all coal actually. It will cost about maybe how much? 50% of this thing, compared to natural gas, just about 10%, propane 11%, gasoline this. So it's still natural gas undisputedly is the cleanest fuel here. What is LNG? So liquefy natural gas when you cool the gas, natural gas, and cool it to about -160, -162 degrees centigrade, it liquefies. And in liquefaction, it occupies much lesser volume, so 1/600. So it gets reduced to 600 times into a smaller portion as a liquid. And therefore, since it is a cold liquid, always boiling at -62 degrees, it boils, it requires to be kept contained in a very different kind of containment system, like we have thermos bottles. So here is a typical laboratory thermos flask where it is shown that how it is kept. LNG also, like natural gas, is odorless, colorless, non-corrosive, non-flammable, and I'll come to that again. This thing separately to show the flammability and density of this thing. So it's again it's a good way to really compress into liquid form, and then it is easier perhaps to even transport gas. So LNG therefore has gained much more importance in the recent modern world, and countries are making use of it. Just wanted to show a small video as to how it looks like. So, I mean, that was just a glimpse on how the liquefied natural gas LNG looks like, and it is pretty safe to really handle if you know its properties well. And I must also at that point note out and share that there are hardly any accidents that has happened in the LNG business, LNG value chain in the world. Very, very few, hardly one or two to really note on that. Now, the composition of LNG varies because we use natural gas from different basins, different countries. Each gas producing, oil or gas producing basin has its different setting, geological setting, composition. So each basin would have a different composition. Like, for example, Australian New South Wales would have a different composition of methane, ethane, propane, and their gross calorific value would be there. What would be their WOB index? Similarly, for Malaysia, Nigeria, Qatar, on this thing. So what we distinguish between these, they vary, keep on varying, and they remain within a range. A gas which is having more components of higher hydrocarbons, ethane, propane, butane, we call it as a wet gas. And otherwise, we call it a dry gas, where predominantly like this Trinidad, this is a dry gas, which is predominantly over 96-97% is methane only. So it varies, and therefore, when you liquefy, you need to have a different technology for liquefaction and different facilities also to maybe separate it out or to liquefy all and mix together. Coming to the flammability, as you've seen in the video, LNG is flammable only if it is having a 5 to 15% kind of a limit with mixer with air. If it is more than 15% LNG there or less than 5, it is perfectly safe on that. So it gives us a very narrow range of flammability, which is difficult to normally achieve. So if you are able to really design your equipment and your planning with this, then it is important that this is totally a safer operations. Excuse me. Now, coming to the price, it's very important for any country, any organization to really look at the prices. What is the price? Now, we have worked out a very illustrative analysis for India specific. We had all the details here. Considering that the present crude oil is about $80 a barrel, and we see if we take LNG at a linkage of 13%, although there are much better contracts also right now. And if you take the Indian rupee to US dollars, about 74 rupees a dollar, and then work out what are the costs of the different substitutable energy levels with the LNG here, naphtha, fuel oil, diesel, and LPG. You will find regasified LNG delivered is definitely still the cheapest fuel on that. So it makes sense for any country, any organization, any company to really go in for LNG and replace other liquid fuels with LNG. It is not only cheaper, it is much cleaner. It addresses the issues of climate change and pollution, and perhaps very efficient to use also, because it doesn't require you have to close a valve and open that valve instead of having large storage facilities to be created. So many advantages. I think the SAARC members can perhaps work out in their scenario the taxation and other aspects here to really see and evaluate what scenario develops and presently exists in each SAARC nation. Just to quickly a demand scenario, I have to just point out that while the demand for this thing is growing in all the regions here, but in terms of the quantities and the consumption, Asia is the king. Asia consumes about 2/3 of the LNG produced worldwide, and the demand is still growing. So look at the numbers here, 199, 233, and there's million tons of this thing in this area, and this is growing. So just an indicative thing. Although in the American, this is the South America which is coming up here, Middle East, People are looking at substitute to the diminishing domestic gas production here, therefore. But then in Asia, as far as we are concerned, this area is concerned, we are really the major consumer of LNG, and the demand is only growing. Coming to the LNG value chain, and conscious of time, I think we'll have to another 20 minutes or so. Well, the components of a value of the value chain of LNG is that we have the upstream gas production processing, where you produce in the field gas, you process the gas in terms to remove some of the pollutants, SOx, NOx, and other things on that, and then purified gas is transported to a liquefaction plant through a pipeline. And liquefaction plant, you have to have a liquefaction technology which is suitable to the composition of the gas. Once it is liquefied, then it is shipped to the and shipped to a consumer country where there's a regasification receiving terminal, and then it is regasified and shipped to the consumers there. Important thing is that from the value chain analysis, you see the downstream, while the production upstream constitutes just about 20%, 25% of the carbon intensity and the pollution part of this thing, the downstream is the major producer of emissions. And there it's very important that once it is received and really shipped, transported, and delivered at the consumer end, the emissions are controlled. So we need to develop equipment, services, procedures to really see that they're minimizing the emissions here. If you see the trend for regasification and liquefaction, the trends are that we are over a period of time, they are sort of plateauing after 2030, 2035 because of the presently the demand scenario is not clear. Beyond that, this requires major investment decisions which are taken in a foreseeable time frame, not just such large time frame segments. There are risks attached, and we need to really address those. So very quickly on the upstream, the basic thing is that one should have assured gas supply for long term, and we should use appropriate drilling, production plan, gas gathering stations, gas processing plants, compression stations, and then pipeline connectivity to the liquefaction. And as a thumb rule, and of course we must point out that this is a major investment decision here. So therefore, you need to be sure that you have the gas, required gas for years to come in. You have the right technology for liquefaction, and you have the consumers at the other end that are committed, and you are able to sell those. As a thumb rule, each million ton of LNG that is required for production for 20 years, which is a normal life taken for a liquefaction plant, a reserve base about 1.5 trillion cubic feet is required. So one has to really see which gas reserves qualify for LNG production. That's a very, very extensive exercise that need to be done. What are the other risks on the downstream? On the downstream, when we are saying liquefaction, you need to have surface facilities, project scope, infrastructure. You must have, again, we have talked about this. Commercial, what kind of shareholders you have, the partners, customers, must have contracts in place. You must match your commissioning of the plant with the contracts with the off-takers, so that you move it in tandem. At the moment the plant is ready, the customers can take the LNG there. What is the competition? What are the other issues? Project management is very important, that we really are able to do efficient project completion on time, execution plan, human resources required for that, management systems, procedures, policies are very important. You may have all the thing placed, but if you are not able to do a proper management, there can be delays and long delays, and we have seen many of the projects worldwide getting affected because of this. And then of course political issues also, where the government bodies, local bodies, regulations come in way, and you need to address them. So all these are the risk factors one has to take into account to be able to really have a successful liquefaction project there. So liquefaction, Sufficient proven gas reserves, gas composition would determine the liquefaction technology, the capex, opex. One of the most important factors for liquefaction is the thermal efficiency of the system, of the technology. Then you need to know what is the business model. Liquefaction, is it a complete one ownership or it is a joint venture? What are the roles of the joint venture? Whether you are working on a tolling basis, tolling we'll discuss later on. Tolling is again a different model that has come up, or you're open to a third party access and give them capacity booking on use or pay basis. So you need to really know what is the business model, and therefore appropriately it would be also having a clear financial model as well on that. Then the long-term offtake agreements. You have long-term offtake, or you want to have a merchant sales capacity. You need to take risk on that. The LNG started from one project of liquefaction to one project of off-takers of that. So firm offtake and firm liquefaction of this. Then you need to know a very important aspect of the value chain is the shipping arrangement. So what are the parameters to determine whether it is the buyer who makes the arrangement for shipping or the producer of the LNG makes the arrangement, whether they are for long-term arrangement for shipping or it's a spot. So all these things have to be taken into account to really look at that. These aspects will be dealt with in detail in other sessions, in coming sessions on this. So just to say same thing on this, that the regasification and liquid both are having a upswing increasing trend, and we'll see later on what are the exact thing happening there. As of now, if you see very latest 452 million ton of capacities there in 2020. The other two categories which are under construction, the pre-FID, huge capacity is under pre-FID category, where they have not taken the final investment decision. The project still has some issues to be settled, but they have proven reserves, they have the site, they have maybe the stakeholders or shareholders in position, but it has not really taken the final decisions. And there are projects in all parts of the countries here, USA, Canada, Australia, Russia, and Mozambique. We know many projects being talked about for several years. In 2020, only one project had taken shape in Mexico. That is 3.3 million ton. And this year, we are expecting the expansion in Qatar. So if this also comes up, in coming years, we are assured of huge capacity. And we may have a situation of an overcapacity of liquefaction available in the world, which is good for the buyer's point of view, actually. These are the major 15 top LNG producer countries. Very surprisingly and interestingly, Australia has become #1, where Qatar used to be #1 here, and they have these market shares. So first top, if you see these, there of course Qatar again has expansion plan, would go to 110 or something. Australia also has some plan. So this is a big race for really being the first in producing. But the world is assured of large capacities of liquefaction available, good for the buyer and for the LNG business. There are of course some challenges when you put a liquefaction plant. If you see 3 segments over the last several years of the project that have come up, earlier projects up to 2000 were having lesser cost per ton of liquefaction. Then came in the 2002, 2010, the costs started increasing. But this is a challenge post 2010. The per ton costs have really gone very high. There are several things. There was high competition between that time. The vendors for equipment producers and all were limited. Manpower costs had gone very high, and therefore we have seen some of the projects getting delayed substantially, and also the costs have gone up. So one of the challenges to really look at the costs, and if the cost goes up, how are you going to really make up for the extra cost from your, it would be reflected on the LNG price only. So there's a challenge there. How do you really match that and make it viable project in time to come? LNG shipping, as I said, is a very important aspect of the LNG because you have liquefied LNG instead of pipeline of a normal gas transportation. It is the ship which takes the LNG to the consumer, actually, or consumer country, or consumer, a trader, or somewhere where it can be stored. So we have about year to year about 7% growth here. Active vessels about 573. New vessels are adding on every year, about 35. And these are the floating system. We'll talk about floating system worldwide, but shipping is trying to keep in touch and in race matching the requirement of the industry. However, there have been problems time to time. We had last year end a problem where the LNG ships availability was, they were contracted, most of them were contracted, and availability became an issue, and therefore the prices for shipping went very, very high. So those things, seasonal changes, variations, demand supply disruptions do happen, and they create distortions in the shipping per day freight or long-term contracts. If you see the capacity of the ships that vary, we had smaller ships earlier, smaller capacities. Then came in the 2008 and 9, this area where largest ships were constructed. We call that Q series, Q maxes, and which could go up to over 200,000 cubic meters and all. And now the industry is trying to sort of settle to a more optimum size, depending upon how the consumers and the producers are able to contract the volumes. Most appropriate transportation, efficient way of transportation as per the size of the ship is about say 170,000 cubic meters. Seems to be that industry is settling around this for years to come. Regasification, again, they're increasing. Actually, the terminals are increasing. This gives you a schematic of this thing. I think I'll skip and go to the next one. Now, if you see here, this is the ship which comes. It is unloading here into the tank. This is the tank here, and then from tank it is being pumped here into this high pressure pump here, and it goes into the another major part of the regasification. The major parts are storage tank, the pumping system, the vaporizer. Now vaporizer, it's nothing but when a cold LNG comes under controlled conditions, it is vaporized into vapors of gas or vapor condition on that. Now this, what rate is required, how it will be done efficiency wise, that is how different types of vaporizers are available on that. And I think in the detail would be dealt with this. But here, where you really have to heat this, in countries, in cold countries, you need to heat it. Like here, you have to heat some medium which heats the gas which comes into the shell and tube vaporizer in the tubes and gets into the vapor form. Here it is liquid, here it is vapor form. And this heating parts are metered and then put in the pipeline on this. So the important part is that in countries like which are hot, humid weather, in India, for example, we have used the hot air, which is the cheapest way of heating the medium. And the medium is taken any kind of a fluid which is non-reactive, long-term. That is a closed system here, and we reheat with the air, and this again goes and heats up. So it's a much cheaper way and efficient way, and making use of our weather conditions more efficiently. But in winter, you have to have arrangement that if it goes down to very low temperature, and you may require larger rates of regasified LNG, then you may have to use some heating arrangement to heat the LNG. But it works very effectively, and the costs in this is larger cost is because of the power. So the gasification charges, when the regasification terminal charges, depends upon their overall costs, manpower cost, equipment maintenance cost, and the margin that they would like to have overall to give a typical regasification charges per million BTU. So this is how it keeps on working here, illustrative way, and very efficient. If you see the word LNG receiving terminals, there are right now about 133 terminals. There are of course floating system FSRU systems on the which are actually ships with about operating about 24 right now. The numbers are larger. There are about 40 plus countries now which have receiving terminals. If you see the average capacity utilization, it ranges between 35 to 40% only. Not really. Only very few terminals are really operating at very high throughput. These are the major importing countries here. So the new additions have been Bangladesh, Pakistan in this area from the SAARC region. Now coming to the floating system. Now a floating system, FSRU, a floating storage and regasification unit serves the same purpose as a land-based regasification terminal. It has all these things. But you will appreciate while in the land we have more area and more freedom to make equipment of different sizes, ship has a restriction of area. So we need to use very optimally the area there, the space that is available, and also the unique technologies here to put everything together in a limited area. And also here you can add on, keep on adding the storage tanks here. Here, of course, we are fixed. There are, of course, other ways to add on capacity here, but an FSRU is just like a terminal. There are different kind of this thing. A terminal, FSRU is moored here on a depending upon the size, construction work requirement, a different marine structure. Mooring jetty is done and constructed, and it is permanently moored here. And the connectivity is through pipeline here, and then directly connected. Most of the facilities are on there. You need only the pipeline and related facilities on ground here. There are two types of containment systems, very important, which are used in the LNG ships as also FSRU. These are tanks you would have seen are normal tank types, spherical tanks. This is called as Moss type, and this is called as the membrane type. Now, more and more in the modern time, more and more modern LNG fleet is based on the membrane type, about 74–75% of that. This certain issues were important to really have this transition. There is no sloshing. Sloshing is splashing, actually, kind of splashing. Here, the sloshing issue was there, but they have been trying to measure and address it by modifying the storage tanks there. It has lower fuel consumption. It's very important that LNG, you must keep in mind, keeps on boiling all the time. So we look for a very efficient kind of a containment system where we can keep LNG, which does not allow more vapors to escape. We need to have a system which can catch these vapors again and recondense it. And how do you create that perfect insulation so that there is a minimal boil off? So here in the membrane system, while the boil off used to be about 0.15% as a typical thing, even more than that, these days it has come to 0.06, 0.07% of that. Very efficient kind of a containment system. You have better maneuverability in the membrane system compared to Moss system. There are many other things that can be compared, but I think these membrane systems are today the most popular ones. Just to give an idea of a tank, this is a tank which uses the Invar or nickel steel as the insulation material. And just to give you a size, there's a person here. This is a huge size here, and this tower here has the pumps and all at the bottom here.
Ashokji, excuse me, can I just intervene for a second?
Yes, please.
Yes, we are already away from the schedule. So would you just wrap it up in like 1 to 2 minutes?
Okay, fine. Okay.
Thank you.
So this is just they are available with the FSRUs that are available. The difference, the advantages of a land terminal and an FSRU floating system. Tolling, I said that tolling is one that the toller only provides the services, and a customer comes with the gas, if the regasify my gas or liquefy my gas, both ways, liquefaction is here, and he takes the liquefied gas and pays the services for liquefaction as a tolling fee. And there are different models of that which can be dealt with this. There are, of course, very important aspects of the element of pricing. I will only touch initial part of that. And I think details will be dealt with by colleagues in the faculty in the subsequent sessions on that. What are the important parts? Unlike oil, gas is sold in terms of units of energy, not volume or like oil. Since gas is difficult to transport, so the price is influenced by and set locally or regionally, not like globally. And therefore, we find that gas markets are differentiated with different prices, and there are many markets like that. While 55% of the gas is transported pipeline, they're consumed separately, but then LNG market, it is sold as cargoes. Cargo is the containment, the amount that one ship can carry. Cargo size can vary depending upon the ship, but the LNG is sold as per million BTU or per therms or per joules. And in mature markets, the prices where you can take it, then the demand, supply, weather condition, all those influence the prices. We look for reliable natural gas price benchmarks, and that's very important. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to really set a price. So what are the things? The LNG market actually does not meet these all criteria fully. There is no transparency in the LNG pricing, and therefore there are challenges which are there in really coming out with the market and settling for the market. How the market is developed, how mature is the market, how the market liberalizes on that. All those issues are there. A fully standardized LNG SP is not available actually in this. So there are many other things which are happening right now, but the market is slowly moving towards more standardization, more transparent way of working. But I think it's going to take a long time till we really have a desired level of transparency in marketing. These are the 4 different type of global markets. I think I would stop here because there are many things that we can take on, but on the details, I think because of constraint of time, I leave it here and put my last slide. I would be happy to really take any other question that are there, and I'm sure our faculty members, Mr. Garg, Mr. Rajiv Mathur, Mr. Prasad Swami Sahab, would take these issues in detail. Thank you very much. We'll be happy if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Balyan Sahab, for your very excellent presentation. And just to give a brief information about the schedule of this training to all the participants, normally what has happened is that Balyan Sahab has given an overview of all these sections of this whole training program for 5 days. So surely we will delve into details on every aspect of LNG in coming days and in coming sessions. So definitely these pricing mechanisms and all these aspects will be covered in details in next sessions. So next thing is many participants have been asking that we need to share presentations with them. So all these presentations delivered during this training program will be available on our websites during and after the training program is completed. So be assured that it will be available on our website. So now we are coming up to quick 1-2 questions for Mr. Balyan. One is from Mr. Muhammad Shah Alam from Bangladesh. His question is, what is the biggest FSRU in operation in terms of the storage capacity?
Well, there is an initiative, the challenge is again when you are talking about FSRU, how cost effectively you can build an FSRU. So in this process, it was also thought that why not convert an existing ship, which is not being used, to convert it into an FSRU. So there is a ship which is of QMAX size, which is being thought about converting into an FSRU. And the technical studies, because you have to, while you convert, many equipment, vaporizers, all those things, power requirement, are very essential. They need detailed study in terms of where to place all these equipment on that. But maximum of Qmax size is being thought about, and there were studies done to really convert into an FSRU. Ideally, otherwise, many of those new FSRUs are of course the range of 174, 75, 170, but older ships give an advantage of cost effectiveness, and therefore many older ships, even 10-year-old, are being getting converted into FSRU, and one of them has been perhaps the biggest so far.
Thank you very much, sir, for your answer on that. So we have another questions, but folks, what we would do is we would like to take a break from this training right now. We are already lacking on our schedule, so we will. I think we can have a break of 5 minutes instead of 10 minutes. So we'll meet again after at 11:25 Pakistan Standard Time for the next session, which was on the gas LNG demand and key challenges. And then in the subsequent session of question answer session, we would like to cover these leftover questions and then the questions from the second presentation also. So thank you very much again, and we'll meet after 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
ठीक है.
So, okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to this online training. So we move on to our next session, which is on the gas LNG demand and key challenges. The main contents covered during this presentation would be demand and projection of energy sources, including share of natural gas across global and SAARC member states, challenges and benefits of natural gas as a transition fuel. The presentation will be delivered by Mr. Swami Dayal Prasad. He has a rich experience of 4 decades in energy sector, power generation and fuel sourcing, a graduate mechanical engineer from Agra University. He also possesses an executive postgraduate diploma in business management from Management Development Institute, Gurgaon. He has a deep learning of the coal and gas sourcing. So before starting presentation of Mr. Swami, I would like to ask the participant that this training is meant to be an interactive session. So all the participants are welcome to put up any questions at any time of the presentation. We would put up these questions to the participants during the presentation and after the presentation. So you are most welcome to ask any questions anytime. So can we ask Mr. Swami to start his presentation? Over to Mr. Swami, sir.
Thank you, Sanji. At the very outset, sincere thanks to the SAARC Energy Center, Dr. Nawaz, Dr. Tanveer, and you. And of course, I welcome all the participants to this session. So we have had a wonderful session just now by Dr. Balyan. And let me now take this journey forward. Not able to get the link. Sanji, can you forward the link? I'm not able to see the link.
Which link, sir? Your presentation slide is visible to us. You can, which link are you?
I'm not able to see my presentation slide here. So,
well, you
only do it full scale now, full screen. You can do that. It is visible, very much visible.
Okay, just a moment. Let me see if I'm able to. This is the session 2. Okay. So we had a wonderful session, and in this session, we will cover the energy environment, the global as well as what is the energy environment in SAARC. Background of the global energy consumption has been very elaborately touched by Dr. Balyan, but yet I'll quickly go through some salient parts just for the sake of reiteration. The expected share of different sources and natural gas also piped in the LNG, and the growth potential of natural gas in the SAARC countries, which would be the main focus of my presentation. So what have been the trend of consumption of different sources of energy? We saw in the previous session, and I just reiterate here. I take a slide from BB's Statistical Review 2021 of how the energy has grown: coal, gas, and oil primarily. And the emerging issues, the excessive consumption of fossil fuels resulting in global warming and rise in pollution and health hazards, huge disparity in energy consumption by developed and developing nations, and the emerging technologies which are quite expensive for energy sourcing for a carbon neutral world. The global commitments have been elaborated by Dr. Balyan, the Sustainable Development Goals, the NDCs as agreed in the popularly called Paris Agreement, So the future of fulfilling energy now needs to be guided by our commitments to make affordable energy available to the developing worlds, and yet combat climate change. And natural gas, many tout it as a bridge fuel, but can also be seen as a destination fuel. So we also saw that in almost all the energy scenarios, be that of Shell, EIA, or McKinsey, or DNV, natural gas retains its share of about 23 to 28%. So let us look at the global demand of natural gas. This is Shell's LNG Outlook 2021. This is based on the Wood Mackenzie data. Here, the share of fossil fuels remains nearly 80% in 2040, and this is as against the share of about 60% in the presentation in the DNV's projections that we had seen. So this is one side of the projections, what Dr. Balyan had touched, that none of them are very definitive, but then they give some idea. But interestingly, the demand of gas reaches about 5,000 BCM and retains a share of about 24% in the energy basket. Gas is about 24% growth, 41% growth in the remaining period up to 2040, and renewables growth by 33%. But then the highest growth of gas is in the electricity sector, as electricity is emerging as the largest source of end-use energy. And region-wise, the highest growth is touted in Asia. Well, this study also brought out that the demand for LNG is going to be more than that for piped imports. And the LNG demand is expected to grow at 3.5%. And in the Asian markets, it's to grow at 4% CAGR. And this is a little more granular look. This is the World Energy Outlook 2019 by IEA. And there are three scenarios: the stated policies, the current policies, and the sustainable development scenario. Because of the climate change commitments, we focus more on the stated policies and the sustainable development scenarios, where we see that the world natural gas demand from the different end-use sectors, it reaches about 5,400 BCM by 2040 in the stated policies, and about 3,850 in the sustainable development scenarios of World Energy Outlook 2019. And this is from where this gas comes from: the conventional gas, the tight gas, the shale gas, coal-backed methane. So they all bring up the world gas, and these are the low carbon gases, that is the hydrogen and other low carbon gases. What this illustration or this projection also bring out is that in the world natural gas trade, the share of LNG is increasing. So it is only 352 as compared to 436 at present, but it will gradually increase and take over the pipeline exports. This is one important point I want to make. But then, does the world have enough natural gas reserves? And we saw in the previous presentation that the world did have enough gas reserves, and this is just the reserve, region-wise reserve to production ratios, and the proven gas reserves of different nations. We have taken those countries which have more than 1 TCM of reserves, except those countries which have less than 1, but which are producing LNG. So, having reiterated some of the main points of Dr. Balyan's presentation, what is the growth potential of energy and natural gas in SAARC member countries? So some of the key indicators for economic growth were touched upon, and I would like to reiterate them for brevity. GTP growth rate, well, We have taken the data from the World Bank, and almost all the countries, the GDP is set to grow very high. Now, the elasticity of GDP growth is changing, as also shown in the previous session, yet the consumption is likely to increase because the per capita energy consumption in almost all the countries is very, very less. Besides, there are two more very important indicators for economic growth and growth of energy demand, that is urbanization. And against the global average urbanization levels of about 55%, the SAARC member countries' globalization is much low. Only Maldives and Bhutan have more than 40%. The major economies like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, they all have 38% or less. Sri Lanka has only 19%, Bangladesh and Bhutan has only 42%, Nepal has just 21%. So this is another indicator. And then the population growth. Well, a quarter population resides in this region and is slated to increase. These are the growth rates of population, which are much higher than the global growth rates. So these are the indicators which I have reiterated for brevity, which indicate that this region has tremendous potential for energy demand. And then I have gone to nation-wise analysis of how the energy outlook is likely to emerge. And we have referred to the SAARC Energy Outlook 2030. So for Afghanistan, the energy consumption is expected to grow at 7%. In particular, the petroleum, oil, and lubricants, POL, so petroleum products are likely to grow at 7.2%. In Bangladesh, Bangladesh has the highest growth rate of 7% in energy consumption. But again, the oil is likely to grow at a very healthy rate, gas, oil. Bhutan, the Himalayan kingdom of gross national happiness, what they indicate as a key indicator for their progress, it is surplus in electricity. And it is only next to Maldives in terms of the highest per capita energy consumption in the region. But it is also expected to grow at about 4%, 3 to 4%. And in Bhutan, if you see the share of oil is likely to go up significantly. You see the share from 26%, it is likely to go to 36% in 2030. India, the energy consumption is expected to grow at 4.5%, and the petroleum products are likely to grow at 4.1%, slightly subdued because India has planned to go to CNG in a very committed manner. 70% of the population is to be brought under the CNG network. Maldives, the highest per capita consumption in the region, expected to grow at 4.5% till 2030, and is dependent upon diesel, a petroleum product. Of course, it is planning to go to renewables, and the demand for cooking gas is also expected to increase to replace kerosene as the Nepal is on its way. It's grown very high. It's pretty steady rate of growth of energy demand. But here, the consumption of petroleum products is expected to grow at 8.3%. So that is very, very significant statement for Nepal. Pakistan, the energy consumption is expected to grow at 5.8%, the second highest growth rate in the region, and it plans to increase coal in the energy basket. So Pakistan has plans to increase coal, but petroleum and oil product demand is also expected to grow in Pakistan. Sri Lanka, the growth of energy consumption is expected to grow at 3 to 4%. So we find that almost all the SAARC countries as per this SAARC Energy Outlook 2030, they have a significant growth in energy, demand for energy, and a significant growth in the petroleum products. So if the dependence on petroleum products, what exactly it is, we try to tabulate that. And if we see source-wise share of fossil fuels, and this is how the source-wise share of fossil fuel is there. India, oil and LPG is 30%. So I'm focusing a little more on oil and LPG and coal. So Sri Lanka is 66% dependent upon petroleum products. And Bhutan, of course, Bhutan and Nepal import their 100% from India. Afghanistan 35%, Maldives 100%. But India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all need about 30%, 29%, 26% of their energy needs, fossil fuel requirements from oil. And then what is the dependence of these fossil fuels on imports? So most of the nations are importing the fossil fuels. India imports 85% of its oil, 50% of gas. Pakistan imports 75% of its oil, 25% of its gas. Bangladesh imports 95% of its oil. Sri Lanka 100% of its oil requirement. Bhutan 100%, Nepal 100% from India. Afghanistan nearly 100%, and Maldives also 100%. So SAARC member countries are overly dependent on petroleum products. The consumption of petroleum products, LPG and natural gas, are slated to go up, and the dependence on imports are also expected to rise, the dependence on imports. So does LNG offer economic respite? Just to see that they can allay the increasing import bills of petroleum oil, or is it dependable and affordable? So these are two very important questions, and we'll first like to focus on, does LNG offer an economic respite as compared to the petroleum products? So what are the economic benefits? We have seen the environmental benefits. We saw one illustration in Dr. Balyan's presentation about India, but here I have tried to map out how landed price of natural gas compares with the other fuels in different countries. And in India, we took the landed price of LNG, it varies from $15 to $18 per MMBTU at $80 per barrel crude price. And we tabulated the different fuels, petrol, diesel, naphtha, then the PNG and CNG, and then these non-subsidized and the commercial LPG cylinders. What are their current prices? And what would be their cost of thermal energy? This is in Indian rupees per 1,000 kilocalories, and this is in US dollars per MMBTU. And here is where we find there's a huge arbitrage. Price arbitrage is tremendous for petroleum, diesel, and naphtha, and even the commercial LPG cylinder. It's at $31, and you can get gas easily at 15 to 18. Then Pakistan, comparison of cost of thermal energy. Well, as per the OGRA, the regulator's notification, the provisional prices for distribution of LNG for the SUI North and SUI South were 15.34 and 15.09, excluding the GST. But this is how the cost of thermal energy in the petroleum products at the current prices they fawn out. Petrol is 24.7, diesel is 21.7. So there is a significant arbitrage. Commercial LPG is 60.7. Again, a significant arbitrage over the as compared to the LNG. In Bangladesh, these are the current prices of petrol and diesel, and the CNG and LPG cylinder. Pakistan has also, Bangladesh has also started importing LNG from 2018, and but the prices were controlled, and as per a news item, the loss to BPC on HST sales from June to October 21 were about 1,100 crores. But now they have revised the prices, so we will have to see the impact. But on the revised prices, the price in US dollars per MMBTU is about 26 and 32, and the LPG cylinder is about 26. So there is a significant price arbitrage here as well, and we have tried to map. Now in Sri Lanka, it doesn't has LNG or gas economy, but it plans to import LNG, and we worked out the estimated landed cost at crude prices 50, 70, and 80. We took a 12.5% crude parity for the delivery ex-ship. The regasification charges as per the industry norms, pipeline transportation costs for the bulk consumers, the cost came out like this. And for the retail consumers, the cost came out to be about 80. And when we compared the cost benefit in LNG as compared to the other fuels at the current prices, we found that there was a significant benefit. This is the benefit in the last column. Is petrol for retail, it is 37 to 46. Bulk, it is more. Even industrial kerosene, there is an arbitrage on switching over to LNG. Bhutan also does not have any gas, but we estimated the prices, the landed cost of a virtual LNG supply chain is by road transportation, and we found that this is how the LNG prices would be there. And when we compared the cost of thermal energy in Bhutan with the other fuel sources, petrol, diesel, and the LPG, we found that there is a price arbitrage. Now it is very interesting because Bhutan gets its supply of subsidized cylinders from India, but it also needs more LPG, and that is where probably it can look at LNG or the regasified LNG supplied by the virtual pipelines. Petrol, the arbitrage is not much, and Bhutan incidentally has decided to go in for EVs, but definitely for diesel, there is a price arbitrage. In Nepal, we worked out the landed cost of the virtual LNG supply chain from India. Transportation costs were for about 1,000 kilometers ex Dhamra, and these can come down once the Haldia terminal comes up. So we took the crude prices at 50, 65, and 80, and the delivery ex-ship at 12.5% of crude parity, and the other costs, then the road transportation costs and the bulk consumer cost would emerge like this, about $15 for the bulk consumers. Now, interestingly, the term contract prices for LNG are now negotiable. We will deal this in detail in one of the sessions, and the downward prices can be explored. So this is the kind of price benefit which you have, benefit in case of Nepal, and the different as compared to the sources. If you compare the cost of thermal energy as compared to petrol, diesel, LPG, you find that there is a significant arbitrage. There is an arbitrage, 58%, 46%, LPG 20%. Coal, of course, it's not there. Coal cannot be replaced. So having seen that there is an economic benefit, and we are consuming a lot of petroleum products, so what is our analysis of the demand supply for natural gas in the SAARC member countries? And here we have referred the SAARC report as well as some research. Well, first we took India, which has the highest energy demand. What is the present scenario of the gas supply? We went through the government plans. The government has planned to increase the share of gas in India's basket from 6 to 15% by 2030. Besides, there's a very strong policy support from the government as well as from the upstream regulator to boost investment into exploration and production, and to see that we can have more domestic production. The present gas consumption in India is about 170 mmSCMD, which is domestic plus regasified. 92 mmSCMD is the domestic, and the rest is, this was last year, but now current domestic production has increased to about 92. 6 RLNG terminals are in operation with the nameplate capacity of 40.5, but then the effective capacity right now is 26.9. So in the next coming few years, these terminals would be operating at 40.5, and 4 new terminals are under construction. The financial budget outlays have already been committed, and they are in different stages. So by 2025, the capacity of LNG is likely to be 60.5, or if some other developments take place, it may be even more than this. This is the gas supply scenario in India, which we have mapped, and this is the gas supplies from the RLNG, how the terminals are going to come up. And then we did the demand analysis. We went a bottoms up segment-wise demand analysis for CGD, city gas distribution, which is growing at about 15% till 27, and then 10% thereafter. For refineries, the growth will be driven by the demand for hydrogen, and the gross margins on gas. For the industry, it would be driven by the tighter emission norms and the price arbitrage. Almost as all the industrial belts get connected with trunk pipelines by 2023. Fertilizers have an organic growth as per the domestic requirement, and they are least dependent upon imports. But they would be requiring some LNG also. Power, the demand potential is depending upon LNG prices, and our analysis is that in the LNG prices, the power, India has enough generating sources, and on LNG prices, power from gas-based stations, even with F-class machines, they are not competitive. But as per another analysis, we found that the gas-based power, it offers lower priced power than the battery system, which is being touted. So these are the approximate tariffs in India under different circumstances. Even the imported price, imported coal-based generation, which is a huge landed price these days of $140 and $50, it is still lower than the LNG prices. LNG delivered prices we have taken at just about $13. So this is how the supply scenario emerges in India: RLNG, domestic gas, and the total gas. And we have taken the terminal utilization as just about 87%, then 85%, 85%, and 80% later on. And when we map the demand supply gaps, for the demand, we took 2 scenarios. We took one reference scenario, which would be with low crude and soft LNG prices, so demand would be higher. So demand would be a little more higher here. And the other scenario we took was where the crude prices would be a little higher, and the LNG prices would be higher, and demand would be a little subdued. So this is a conservative scenario, and you see the demand slightly gets subdued here if you see the numbers as compared to the reference scenario that we have here. The supply we have taken as per the previous supplies from domestic as well as RLNG. Interesting play was that there is a significant surplus available here in 2025, even in the reference scenario of low crude. And if you have high crude prices, the availability of surpluses is much more. So this was a very interesting finding from this play. For Pakistan, we have assumed for the domestic gas supplies, there is a decline in the domestic gas productions. So from existing 87 MMSCMD, it is likely to come down to 44 by 30, 37 by 35, and 34 MMSCMD by 2040. And in case we do get some good discoveries in the offshore, these values may change. Then we have taken into account gas imports from Iran and Turkmenistan to commence soon in next 3 to 4 years, and then ramp up gradually. So we have taken some ramp up rates also. And we have taken the regasified LNG from existing and the future terminals of Pakistan, the existing terminals, Angro and the Pakistan gas port terminals. Here we have taken the utilization to grow to 80% in 2025 and 90% by 2030. And for the future terminals, we have taken Energas, Tawid, Fatima, Angro expansion, Gasport expansion to come. All of them should come on stream between 22 and 40. Now, all of them do not have, I think one of them does not have a license from the OGRA right now, but we do expect that the demand may push the future terminals also to come up. For the demand analysis, Pakistan, we found from the OGRA reports, the sector-wise share is very well balanced amongst all the consuming segments. Of course, power and captive power, they have the highest share, but other sectors also have a very decent share in the overall basket. So very balanced share of consumers in Pakistan, and quite rightly so, the first economy in this region to have gone on gas. And for the demand assumptions, we adopted a sector-wise bottom-up approach, and we took the demand for power as the growth rates of gas consumption for all existing gas-based power plants. For fertilizers, we took gas consumption growth as per the existing share in the total gas. For industries, we adopted the industrial GTP growth rate as available with the finance reports, Pakistan. And for the domestic and commercial, we assumed the growth of connections and the consumptions per connections. What are the consumption per connections? So the CNG, we took the prevailing growth of consumption as a share of the total gas. And we say, this is the growth, this is how this can go. Then we modeled it a bit. So we got this kind of demand and supply scenario emerging for Pakistan. The demand emerges as 120. This is an MMSCMD. It can be converted into MCFD by multiplying by 35 or so. And this is the supplies, how the supplies should evolve in 2025. And then subsequently Iran, Pakistan, TAPI, RLNG, and domestic production. Now, the interesting part here is that in the IGCEP 2018-40, that is the indicative generation capacity expansion plan, the gas generation capacity has been touted to come down from 12,020 to 8,512 in 2030 and about 8,000 in 2040. In that case, the power sector demand, which I had very specifically brought out, it would change. Because what we have analyzed later, that IGCP's generation mix in December 18 and IGCP's generation mix in 2040, we find that the gas comes down drastically. Just about RLNG is 7% and natural gas is just 2%, so 9%, as compared to almost about 33%. Right now, it is gas is 13% and LNG is 22%, so 35%. So in case this happens, but then again, we are also a little uncertain about the Iran, Pakistan, and the TAPI pipeline. Iran, Pakistan because of the sanctions, fear of sanctions, and TAPI because of the upheavals in Afghanistan. And there has been a meeting recently between Turkmenistan and Afghanistan on the TAPI pipeline, as we read in the news. But then in case the power sector demand does come down, then it will also take care of any reductions in the TAPI. And in case gas supplies from offshore, they increase, Pakistan is able to find some good discoveries, then again, there would be a good balancing of the demand and supply. Lastly, the RNG terminals, which have been taken at only 80%, they can always run up to their nameplate capacities and produce more LNG and more RLNG. So that way, Pakistan is, we found it is quite comfortable with the kind of planning which it has in place for the RLNG. Now for Bangladesh, Bangladesh is the only is the real gas-based economy in the region. Its GDP growth rate is the highest in the SAARC region. It has had availability of cheap natural gas, which helped it to sustain all the challenges of the imports of petroleum and LPG and register phenomenal growth. However, the domestic gas production in Pakistan is declining, and it is compelling the country for more efficiency in demand side management, particularly in power generation, and they have already done a commendable work on that. Then intensive pursuit of its exploration and production projects in offshore, which again they are pursuing in a very definitive manner, because they have their offshore basins are very close to the Myanmar's basin, which are producing a lot of gas, and they have already resorted to installation of the 2 FSRUs at Mahesh Khali. Mahesh Khali is the most suitable site on this Bangladesh sea coast. It's the most placid ocean-facing site. Besides, the country has planned to become a developed economy by 2041, and this is going to place a lot of challenge on the sourcing of energy. So the growth in demand and supply and its energy planning has been captured in the Power Sector Master Plan 2016 and the Gas Sector Master Plan 2017. And of course, these have been recently updated also to chart the growth rate and make the course correction. So we went through the Power System Master Plan, the PSMP 16, which was prepared by the Bangladesh government in cooperation with the GCA. And we analyzed the segment-wise growth and the decline of the gas production. The plan also, the reference plan, the reference scenario, it advocates more of coal-based capacity in power generation. The Gas Supply Master Plan 2017 was prepared by Bangladesh government in consultation with Ramble. This came after the PSMP 16, so it takes into account the delays in implementation of the gas coal-based capacity, and it projects 3 scenarios. One is the modified PSMP scenario, or the scenario A, and one is the high growth, there's a 9% GDP growth rate scenario, the scenario B, and then the climate change scenario is the scenario C. So the modified PSMP or the further modified PSMP and the climate change scenario are more likely to occur. Now, 2 domestic gas supply scenarios are projected while considering the unexplored reserves and basins in Bangladesh. The first is a realistic scenario, which says that proven, probable, and possible, that is a 3P plus 6.4 TCF of yet to find reserves. And this is how the reserves which are there, the 7 reserves. And then the high production scenario, which is the 3P plus 34 TCF, which should emerge, the gas output should emerge like this. And this is when we saw the demand, on the demand side, Bangladesh also has a very diversified basket of segments consuming gas. And the gas demand in the 3 scenarios in the GSMP were mapped, and they came out like this. The scenario A is the modified PSMP, B is the high growth, and C is the climate change. So we did some scenario mapping. Scenario 3 and 4 were the modified PSMP and supply as per realistic, that is 3P plus 6.4. And scenario 4, the modified PSMP and supply as per the high exploration. And we found, when we mapped it, we found that these 2 scenarios, scenario 3 and scenario 4, which are more likely to emerge, they have gaps. They have huge gaps. The demand is 4450, and there are going to be gaps here. Now, coming to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is yet to strike gas from its basins. We quickly reviewed the ENP scenario of the country. The nation has 3 sedimentary basins, the Mannar, Kaveri, and the Lanka basins. In 2012, Keynes made 2 discoveries of gas in Mannar Basin. the Barracuda and the Dorado reservoirs, which were touted to have significant gas initially in place reserves. But then Keynes relinquished these blocks. He did not find them commercially viable. So what Sri Lanka has done, it has now planned to develop a multi-client data repository, which now most of the countries are also pursuing the same strategy, so that this can be offered to prospective developers. And it has made some significant tie-ups with tie-ups with the Total, Schlumberger, Bell Geospace for collecting a lot of seismic and other data, and it does possesses significant amount of data and is still pursuing its quest for monetizing its reserves. The country has witnessed a very significant policy shift towards gas. One of the reasons could be that Sri Lanka is incurring a substantial subsidy on petroleum products. What I recall is that in 2017-18, as per the annual report, it was about 30 billion Sri Lanka rupees in the CPETCO's annual report. So in its National Energy Policy and Strategies 2019, gas is now the fuel of preference. And a national policy on natural gas has also been drafted by the PRDS, which looks after the upstream side. The share of gas in the energy mix is now targeted to grow to a third by 2030. Besides, the Sri Lanka government has approved an energy mix policy wherein two-thirds of the generation is to be met by firm energy capacities, and this firm energy capacities would have a share of 30% coming from LNG. So this policy now is the basis for the generation mix and the 20-year long-term generation expansion plan, which has been prepared recently by CEB, Senior Electricity Board, and it is now seriously, Sri Lanka has been implementing its LNG options. Two places, the Hambantota as well as of Colombo. Well, the IMO 2020 regulations, they restrict the sulfur content to 0.5% in bunker fuels. And there has been a spate of new order for vessels with propulsion systems, which include LNG also. Now, Hambantota is a deep sea port, strategically located midway in Asia-Pacific trade routes, as well as the Asia-Pacific to Gulf and between Asia-Pacific and Europe. So in August 2020, Sri Lanka's Board of Investments, it inked an agreement with Pearl Energy, and they launched to launch an FSRU-based LNG trade terminal at Hambantota. So this terminal will have multiple uses. It will help to refuel the vessels which have fuel systems as LNG, and it will also help to meet Sri Lanka's future gas demand in that part of the island, and would also offer short-term sourcing options for LNG terminals in India and Pakistan. So that is a very interesting play which would come out, which would evolve from the Hambantota LNG hub. Recently, Sri Lanka has signed a framework agreement with the New York-based New Fortress Energy to construct its first offshore FSRU LNG terminal near Colombo. So this terminal will supply LNG to the existing the natural gas-based power plant. And there's also an MOU with Lng Danavi Limited, the largest EPC company in Sri Lankan power plant, to collaboratively develop a gas-fired power plant at Keravalapatriya. So these are the recent developments in Sri Lanka. And when we did the demand-supply analysis, we referred the long-term generation expansion plan, as power would be very central to the demand. Also, we refer to the growth of petroleum products in LPG, and based on our findings, based on the price arbitrage, based on the levels of subsidies of CPETCO, the penetration of gas in petroleum were nominally assumed. Three scenarios were plotted. Scenario one was the gas penetration only in the power. Scenario two was power plus some penetration in petroleum and LPG segments. And then in scenario three, in addition to scenario 2, we took 25% higher penetration in power sector, replacing coal, because there were concerns that if we can get hold of gas, why to go to coal? Coal is also imported by Sri Lanka, and coal imports also are subject to the vagaries of volatility and prices. Now here it is very important because a long-term LNG would not have too much of volatility as long as the crude prices remain stable. But coal prices see a much higher volatility the moment the demand goes a little bit here. And this is how the summation took place. So this is how the demand is emerging in Sri Lanka in the 3 scenarios. Scenario number 2 should be the most, the reference scenario. For Nepal, we know that petroleum products comprise about 61% of Nepal's commercial basket, and the petroleum products are slated to grow over 8%. The major chunk of population and the industrial activities in 4 provinces bordering India. So the bordering areas in India, they are already awarded to entities under city gas distribution bidding of 2018-19, and they will all have access to gas in a few years. So we worked out 3 gas supply options for Nepal: a trunk pipeline, then multiple small diameter short distance pipelines from India's CGD networks just across the border, and then the virtual or a small scale LNG. That is, the landed cost from the virtual LNG was preferred as its cost and gestation period was the least. So later on, once the penetration sets in, the LNG and the gas penetration sets in, the multiple small diameter and short distance pipelines can be laid later on. So this is the growth of the petroleum products, and this is the kind of gas penetration which we have assumed. These are the levels of penetration. Industry, which is dependent more on HST, if you take. Now see, if you just consider HST, in transportation, we have assumed very little penetration. Industry, we have assumed a higher penetration because bulk supplies can be made much cheaper to replace HST. In other segments, about 50%, in LPG, about 15%. So that is how we have assumed, and we have seen that there is going to be a demand coming from Nepal as well. Similar to Nepal, we carried out the analysis for Bhutan, except that in Bhutan, hydropower forms the bulk of energy sources, and petroleum products comprise about 34% in the commercial energy basket. Coal share is 26%, but mostly it is for the steel, and then substitution by gas would not be feasible because for steel making, coal, gas cannot be substituted. Like Nepal, all the bordering areas with India are covered with CGD and will have access to gas. So in future, short distance, small diameter pipelines can be laid. And like Nepal, the landed cost of 3 options were worked out, but laying a trunk pipeline was not found to be technically feasible. The virtual LNG was found to be most economical, and at the estimated landed cost, retail petrol and subsidized LPG may not be able to switch at the prevailing prices. And as I said, this country is surplus in electricity, and it is decided to experiment more on the EV mobility. They have also ordered many EV taxis. So maybe petrol switching may not be feasible, but diesel certainly yes. So penetration opportunities do exist for the bulk consumers of HST and for the commercial LPG, because the quota of subsidized LPG from India is very limited. And when we worked out the approximate penetrations and the approximate the demand scenario, some LNG demand did emerge from Bhutan as well. For Afghanistan, the existing gas demand is mostly from the gas-based fertilizer plant at Kodebok. The fertilizer capacity utilization is presently much low, but we have assumed that it will rise gradually. It will reach 75% by 2030. And we assume that the gas-based capacity planned at Mazar and Sher Bargan will come up. So we assumed the growth rate of the present gas consumption to gradually to increase to over 9%, and then to gradually decline from 9% in 2030 to about 2.5% in 2040. And this is how the demand supply analysis played out for Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan is dependent, the future is more expected to be dependent upon the TAPI, where it has a share of about 500 MMSCMD for first 10 years and 1 billion, then maybe 1.5 billion for the next 10 years. So it is very much dependent upon TAPI, and in case the TAPI pipeline does not come up, then Afghanistan would look up to Pakistan for maybe LNG imports or maybe short-term for the small-scale LNG imports. So Maldives, the growth of petroleum diesel have been taken as 10%, gradually declining, and then growth of LPG has taken at 5% over the past consumption, and penetrations have been assumed as 5% in petroleum diesel, gradually increasing, and LPG penetration has been assumed as 10%, gradually increasing to 25%. So we modeled that, and this is how the gas demand emerged in Maldives. So this was our analysis, and we conclude this presentation by saying that to meet the Sustainability Development Goal number 7, that is affordable energy for all, the SAARC member countries would continue to depend upon fossil fuels. The future trends indicate that the share of natural gas will be around 23 to 25%. The global gas trade, the share of LNG is expected to grow at 3 to 4%. And as per the key economic growth indicators in the different nations of the SAARC member countries, the energy consumption is slated to grow between 5% to 7% amongst the member countries. And the member countries have a very high dependence on petroleum products. And LNG, natural gas, offers price arbitrage, and the expected demand of gas and demand on LNG ports are expected to increase as per some of our modelings done. So that is roundabout all. Thanks, and now I'm available for the questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Swami Saab, for a very excellent presentation. So the first question to us is posted by Mr. Umar Aftab. He's from Pakistan. His question is that strategically, what will be a better option for non-LNG producing countries, especially in the Asian region, to expand their existing regasification facilities with a more longer-term view? Either should they develop more FSRU-based terminals, or they should invest in the onshore terminals?
I'll take on this question, sir.
Please.
Well, I think first of all, one has to see what kind of gas demands are there in the country and what are the long-term perspective of the gas demand. That forms the basis. What are the consumption rates, what sectors are growing, and dovetail all into overall gas demand over a long period of time. That's the basic requirement first. Number two, when it comes to what kind of terminal to be established, depends upon various important points. Number one, if you are having a very urgent need, there is an immediate requirement to be met on that, then you have a different approach. You look for maybe a floating system, maybe a better option to really quickly have the gas. And I can cite an example of what Pakistan did actually on very commendable, that getting that FSRU terminal quickly established.
13
but
months.
on the long-term basis, if you are looking at countries' long-term requirement, then I would say that land-based terminals are more stable, more beneficial in many ways, that you can expand them over a period of time, and then their operability over a long period of time is much more than a FSRU system. So in a long-term basis, even the regasification costs over a period of time may be more optimal compared to floating systems. So I think it would depend upon what circumstances, what demand, but certain advantages come in with the land-based terminal. And I think I would recommend for a long-term requirement of a country in SAARC region, they should look for a land-based terminal might be a better one for a long-term perspective of the country compared to a immediate requirement of FSRU. So depending upon the need requirement, I think we can match what would be appropriate.
I just wanted to add that
Yes.
there is a detailed session on this. So we will be having a detailed answer to these queries as we go along. There is a session for that.
Kindly said by Mr. Garg. So I would like to tell the participants that the floor is open for any question answer. They want to ask these questions on the chat box. We will ask directly from the experts. Otherwise, even if you want to ask a question directly with the experts, we can give you the opportunity by opening your mic and you can verbally ask the question. So the second question is from Mohammad Faisal Raja, and his question is, what is the average cost of various stages of LNG value chain?
As we discussed on the value chain, I think there are three important aspects broadly, if you see. One is the liquefaction, when you produce LNG. The other is how do you take this LNG to a consumer, that is the shipping part. The third is that where you receive the LNG, store it, and regasify to supply it. So three major aspects of that. So the first is liquefaction. Now, liquefaction, I showed a slide where the costs have gone up high in the last, I would say, a decade or so because of various factors on that. So that's liquefaction technology, also liquefaction capacity, the location of that. All these influence the cost here. But it is it varies right now about $1,000 per ton kind of a capacity. This can vary upon the situations and the time you take, technology that you choose on that basis. On the shipping, when it comes to shipping, for a project to project, if it is a long term, then it is always better to go in for a long-term shipping arrangement, which would take care of your disruption in shipping, immediate weather disruptions or demand supply disruptions, which we have seen in the last 1 or 2 years' time, that can be taken care of. So long-term contracting, charter hiring of ships, appropriate size is also very important. What would be the demand? You should not hire a very large capacity. You should not hire a smaller one. You need to match your requirement and do that shipping. So if you're going for a long-term charter and have good negotiation, you can perhaps get to a better price. Right now, a charter of a typical 170,000 cubic meters would be around $100,000 a day if you want to take it for a spot cargo or so, which is very high actually. But on a long-term lease charter, the rates may be around $30,000 a day if you are hiring for a long-term. So you need to match your requirement of this. On the regasification, this thing again, it would depend. If you are trying to look at a floating system, the costs are different. But on a long term, the size of the capacity for storage, each tank is a high cost. So one has to look at what kind of storage capacity one is targeting that. And typically, it might be around somewhere around 700 to less than $1 billion investment, depending upon 5 million ton to maybe 7.5 million ton capacity LNG receiving terminal for a long-term on land kind of a thing on that. So I think it depends upon this thing, but these three are the major component, and you have to really match and optimize your cost depending upon your requirement.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I would just like to add, is my screen visible on this?
Yes, sir. Your screen is visible.
If it is visible, I just want to show one slide. This is a finding by the Oxford Institute of Energy Studies. Just a minute.
Sir, your sorry, your camera is visible. Actually, you have to share your screen now.
Okay.
Yes, now
I've shared my screen. Is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
it is visible. So Oxford Institute did some long-term cost studies on the LNG liquefaction plants, and they considered a lot of factors of what can be the liquefaction costs coming out from the different LNG producing areas. So I just reproduce here some of the important findings of that study because it is very important from the affordability angle, which I would like we would like to discuss this much later on also. But since this question has come here, so Oxford's findings were that Qatar, they divided the total cost from the terminals in three parts. The liquefaction, the gas supply part, then the liquefaction costs, and then the cost of shippings. And then depending upon the markets, the cost of shipping would vary, but the cost of liquefaction is a long-term cost which they have determined after a lot of regressions and a lot of data which has been available to them, made available to them, or they got from consultants. So this is how the liquefaction costs are in the different regions. That is what Oxford study found. And it's all varying from about, say, $1.69 to $1.88 in Qatar to about $3 in the US Gulf of Mexico. New ones are much lower, and the Western Canada is quite high. We will discuss about Western Canada tomorrow in the first session. And Russia also is very high because of the sub-freezing temperatures in their Arctic LNG and the other LNG, and they have spent a lot of investment has gone into steel and concrete structures for making their platforms. So this is just a slide I will share with the participants also. They can go through the original study of OIES, and all the factors have also been explained by Dr. Balyan, how the prices took up, prices do factor in for the cost emerging from different sources. That is.
Each project is actually specific. Each location is specific. And
Yes.
One has to work out how far is the market, what are the other parameters that impact actual throughput. There are projects which have been constructed but are not able to really operate at higher efficiency. The costs, of course, are really problematic. But taking into all considerations about location, site, consumption, this thing, I think you can optimize your costs and come out with a better approach.
So we can't hear you, Ahsan Saab.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Balyan and Swati Saab. So we have another question from Mohammad Shah Alam from Bangladesh. So his question is that so far I know all the LNG terminals in India are onshore. So what are the reasons behind less terminal utilization? Is there any weather issues on terminal utilization?
Yeah, I think I'll take on this. Number one, one addition now that we do have now facilities for a floating system also. There is a floating system terminal that had been commissioned, but not operating fully right now. But we have that connectivity. So why this thing has come up, low usage of the land-based terminal largely can be attributed to the connectivity to the consumer. Now, if you see, for example, I'll give you two examples of my previous company, Petroleum, where Mr. Garg was also my colleague there. The Dahej terminal is the largest terminal in India with a capacity of 17.5 million tons annual storage and regasification. Now, this terminal operates at 100% capacity and is further expanding because the connectivity, which is so important for any regasification terminal, connectivity to the consumer section and customers is very important. This is well connected in the markets and the consumptions are high. So there's no problem and the throughput is almost 100%. Now, when we compare to its own company's South Terminal, Kochi has been commissioned in a 5 million ton capacity in 2013. But the connectivity to the consumers, customers is still being created now. So it operated for initial 2-3 years, just about 5%, 7% throughput capacity utilization. It has now been connected to one good center and it has jumped to about 25%, 20-25% capacity utilization. So what is important for a terminal capacity utilization? You must actually work, to my mind, backwards. Get the consumers first on board. Create the connectivity there. That's very important, because ultimately the viability of a terminal depends upon regasification charges it gets. And it can come only when the throughputs are high. So connect the consumers, create the connectivity, and then match the regasification capacities and operate that. So I think connectivity, pipeline connectivity is an issue in most of the countries. Land issues, operational issues and all, that is taking time in really achieving higher throughput in the Indian terminals. There are one or two which has, because of some technical other problems also are there, which are they are trying to address that. And I hope that in coming years you will find that all terminals there, with the pipeline connectivity being created, a national grid being thought now, connectivity and therefore the throughput would definitely increase in all the terminals.
Definitely, sir, definitely. So, sir, we have a question from Pakistan, and Ijaz Ahmed Siddiqui is asking that the government of Pakistan, how would it be able to fetch a good deal from the spot market? I think this question could be covered in subsequent sections in next days. It's a very
think we can take it up later. Yeah.
Yes. So another question from Jigme Dorji. I think Mr. Jigme is from Bhutan. I would ask all the participants that if you are typing the question, please mention your name and your country name, so we know the country, which question is from which country. So Mr. Jigme's question is that what are the barriers and challenges for production and promotion of LNG?
Well, I think when you see broadly challenges, if you have, we've seen examples of countries who have huge reserves of gas, they would naturally like to monetize this gas because their own consumption is limited. They see as a good resource which can be in demand world over. So I think to establish a liquefaction plant, there are challenges which I covered in my area. There are investment plans, there are risks of approvals and all. There are some projects which are being talked about for last several years, but for some reason they have not taken complete shape because the local government issues. You need to settle your several negotiation with the local governments, people, shareholders problem, investment issues are there. The cost escalation, how do you meet those cost escalations? You can establish a liquefaction plant, all right, but if you have no off-takers there, how have you been managed to that you are able to sell off-take it for long term? What is the model that you are there? These are the challenges when it comes to the first part of the value chain of liquefaction. Shipping, to my mind, is trying to match the requirement of the customers of the liquefied producers as also the consumers. They match up on this thing, but the challenge is who will build the ships, because this is again a major investment there. So this would be done only when there is an assured contracting for long term or an assured market for spot this thing. So how do you get that matching this thing, that if the project is coming up, we need to decide what are the financial models, what are the operating models of that, and match with the requirement. Like Qatar, we have seen they have their own shipping company. They have a large capacity they have built up because they wanted to work on a delivered basis, that you deliver, and then delivering shipping is a major important segment. So they made sure that not only they are selling, but they are delivering it also. Some other producers do not have the shipping of their own, so they contract on long term. The buyers also have their own choices. They say that either I like to deliver, get it delivered, so you supply it. Some consumers say, no, it's okay, I will take it on my this thing. I am okay with my contracting. So depending upon models, the challenges are there in all the major segments of the LNG value chain, and one has to really see what applies best, what fits in best for a country, and then take a decision.
I guess, sir, if the question has come from Bhutan.
So, sir, for a landlocked country like Bhutan, I think what they need to do is focus on a policy for cleaner fuels, allow LNG as a fuel to be, recognized as a clean fuel to be utilized in Bhutan, create all the regulatory and other requirements conducive for RLNG to be utilized or CNG to be utilized within the system, and create a niche market in transport and industrial or other sectors for LNG to be used. And then cooperate with the neighboring countries like Bangladesh, India for regas capacity. And easily trucking can be done, which is established now over 1,000 kilometers or even less, because from the eastern coast of India as well as Bangladesh, distance may be only 500 kilometers or thereabouts. That can easily be done. Create small scale RLNG stations within Bhutan, and then create an ecosystem of trucking and creation of CNG and LNG stations in Bhutan for rollout of CNG and LNG in Bhutan. So if they create a clear roadmap, I think it's a doable option, sir.
Absolutely right. We have overcome most of the technological barriers as far as transporting LNG in small volumes are concerned, and as far as vaporizing it is concerned, as Mr. Mathur has put. So there are not many barriers on the supply side or on the vaporization side, but definitely the distribution has to be worked out, and which is now easily available. The technology, the players, the contractors on the distribution side are now available in this subcontinent.
Specific to a country, their need requirements can always be addressed. If it is a landlocked, cannot have access to the shipping, this thing, like any large terminal, today in India, supplies by trucks. There are dozens of customers who take LNG from any terminal by truck to their premises. They store their limited quantities as per their requirement. The same thing can be done and replicated. What Mr. Rajiv has said can be easily replicated to areas or to countries where it can be done, and perhaps is the best option for them.
Yes, very rightly said, and I think the delegate from Bhutan can refer to the sessions of presentation which will be more focused on the regulatory and policy side, in which I'm pretty sure that experts would mention them some kind of a roadmap or some kind of prerequisites for promoting this LNG sector in their countries. So, going to another question from Mr. Imran Akhtar from Pakistan. His question is that, how do you see virtual pipeline as a solution for supply of energy to industries? Which countries have successfully implemented the virtual pipeline projects? Kindly elaborate on the safety requirements of the same. The question is from Ogra, Mohammed Salman Ogra.
So virtual supply of LNG is by trucks actually on that. And this is what I understand he wants to know. Yes. Now, when it comes to vehicle taking the LNG to your consumer end, the issue is that the vehicle itself, first, the vehicle itself uses LNG as a fuel. Number two, it carries LNG also as a cargo. Now, as far as the vehicle truck is concerned, there are companies in the world who make specifically vehicles for LNG. It needs slight modification in the engine to use LNG, and there are several advantages of using LNG as a fuel. It is you can take distances. It can cool the vehicle air conditioning. It can cool the engine. So there are advantages of using LNG as a fuel also. And there are countries where thousands of such vehicles are operating right now. US is one of the leaders in that, and there are one or two manufacturers. In Europe, there are vehicles running on LNG. China has about 1,000 trucks taking LNG cargoes to different consumers there. Japan, I've seen hundreds of trucks deploying to consumers on that. In India, we have experience of supplying hundreds of consumers with LNG on that. So one is, as a safety requirement, there are appropriate authorities who really check and have given guidelines on that. Like taking a cargo, there is separate regulations on the storage of LNG. And there are some guidelines available. There are authorities who will inspect and see what metallurgy and all are used in the normal LNG, what pumps are used, or all those things are well defined and are put in practice right now. The challenge is to really use LNG also as a fuel, which is a new thing coming up. So there are now stations, satellite stations, which can dispense CNG in the gaseous form, which can dispense LNG in the liquid form directly, and are used now at many places. In India also, we have started using both dispensing LNG as well as dispensing CNG from the same satellite station, and that LNG can be taken and offloaded at the consumer end and stored there as per their requirement. So that the trucks keep on really taking it. And of course, the economics works on what is the distance, what is the quantity, and all these are the factors which would determine the viability and affordability and the costs of which is a better option, whether a pipeline, and if pipeline cannot go, then of course by truck. So there are options. Even coastal transportation through ships is on the same basis actually.
Yes.
One has to really work out the economics, distance, quantity, but these are technologically today are very much practiced and are in vogue in several countries.
Thank you, sir.
So in India, there are at least 8 or 10 companies who are delivering LNG by truck to various industrial units across the country. And there are at least 50-60 such big industries who are being delivered, because there is a virtual pipeline and there's no pipeline connectivity as of now. So it's a proven thing and being done for at least more than a decade now in India.
Thank you very much.
They have done, Rajiv, if you see, they have done all profitably because they have replaced costly liquid fuels also. So it makes sense for them to really go in for a cheaper, cleaner fuel, LNG, rather than.
So you need a LNG storage at the factory end, and the truck lifts the LNG from a terminal and takes the LNG, and the storage is done in a LNG tank there, which is a cryogenic tank. Then it is regasified and used in the industry. So it's a well-proven thing, cost-effective also vis-a-vis alternate fuels.
Yes. So we are receiving many questions right now, but just for the information of participants, like for example, one question is that what is the average tolling fees for LNG in various parts of the world? So this is, I think, in my opinion, a little bit brief reply is required and details are to be given. So I think we can cover these type of questions when their relevant sessions will be delivered by the experts in next 2 to 3 days time. So we would quickly take on one more question, I think. This is from Ms. Mispa Yaqub from Agra, Pakistan. Her question is that the disparity in energy consumption has been noticed when comparing developing and developed countries. Natural gas dominates the energy share in developing countries. So how would you comment on the future planning in terms of exploring sustainable and economical fuel choice for such countries?
Well, I think, as I said in presentation, and as the data has come out very clearly, the choice is that when we make energy choices, we don't just make choices on. We need to really see what all the energy brings into the nation, whether it is polluting, whether it is creating health results, whether it is affordable. All those aspects are to be really taken into consideration when you really decide about the source of the energy. I'll take an example for India. We have 4th largest reserves of coal. We have been using coal, and one of the largest energy source that we're using. But we have realized that over a period of time, this is a polluting thing. So either we use coal in a way when we use clean coal technologies, and then perhaps we can use it. Otherwise, we need to really stop using coal in future. This thing. So there are now attempts to how greener we can make coal, and whether it comes to that acceptable range, which is permissible to be used as energy source. Otherwise, there is virtual kind of a discussion that, well, we need to stop coal. Now, other than coal, what are the other options there? Now, the challenge is also that any country cannot very quickly transition to renewable, which is a cleaner thing. It takes time to really create that infrastructure so that the renewable energy can be assimilated and integrated into the grid. You don't have today storage facilities to store the renewable energy on that. So what are the options? And it takes time. It takes more investment. So I think directionally, I think it is very clear. We need to try to transition to more cleaner fuels, which naturally is right now is methane. It is gas. There are several new developments which we can perhaps could have shared in this thing is the hydrogen, which has the potential of being perhaps the cleanest fuel that the world can aspire for with no pollution coming in there. But the investments in hydrogens are very high. There are challenges. How will you produce commercial quantities of hydrogen? How will you store that? How will you transport that? A ship, for example, we saw that if you transport hydrogen and compare it with LNG today, same quantity of LNG, you will need 2.5 times bigger ship, which is a challenge in shipping industry to transport hydrogen. So it becomes very difficult. So when it comes to energy choices, I think directionally we are okay, but then the cleaner LNG, cheaper LNG, and the trends worldwide are over. We need not really rediscover the trends on that. They're very clear on that. But the choices we make, we must be conscious. We might have to really spend more money, but in the interest of climate change commitments that we are making, and some of the commitments we recently concluded one are very clear. Cost may be higher, but it is cleaner, better, healthier environment that is more important, not just the cost of the energy. So I think directionally we have to move in that direction.
Yes. Thank you very much. So we are out of our time, but just a short question. I would like Balyan Saab or any of the experts to be very brief in this, the answer to this question. The question is from Hassan Bhatti from the Petroleum Division, Pakistan. How do you see the competition of small-scale LNG versus the large-scale in the SAARC region? How big is the LNG by trucking a challenge for the large-scale terminals?
Well, I don't think there is a challenge because small-scale LNG brings in tremendous amount of different advantages, and I think they complement that. So I think they would grow. To my mind, small-scale LNG is a very nice application to address small-scale needs of that, and it's a growing field on that. And the large scale, this thing, it's only a kind of a linkage from a large scale to come to a small scale to a consumer. So I don't see any conflict as such. And all the large terminals are actually creating those facilities which are based on a marine path, either for trucking as also for bunkering. What ships also come in, take their fuel and go. Like in Kochi, we created that facility as well. So I think it's a complementary thing. It would grow, but small scale LNG is going to stay. It's a growing field, definitely.
Thank you.
Just to add on, in the Indian scenario, there are lots of fields which are stranded and which are isolated. And there we are implementing the small scale LNG to use that gas, and we're using the virtual pipeline mechanism, taking it to industrial units and industrial estates. So both are complementary, as Dr. Balyan put it.
Thank you very much.
Even Asal Saab, like coal bed methane, which are found, actually coal bed methane is found in that coal area, which is not a oil province as such, oil and gas province. So in those areas, consumers are less. So what Rajiv is saying, that's what is being practiced, that we produce coal bed methane. We either make it into CNG, compressed gas, and if we are having a larger quantity, which can, because for liquefaction you need more gas, so we use both. Both the options are there, and it is being done. CNG is being done right now, actually, standard gases.
Yes, very right. So I think we would like to conclude this today's training session. I would ask participants that if there is any questions left on their side, they can email us those questions. We would definitely put up these questions to the experts. Secondly, you also have an opportunity to ask questions in next 4 days of this training. And this training is basically meant to be an interactive session. So I would like all the participants to take part in asking more and more questions, just to clarify their concepts and to gain as much knowledge as possible from the respected experts with us. So thank you very much, Balyan Saab, Prasad Saab, Gad Saab, and Rajiv Saab for excellent presentations and discussion sessions. So we would like to conclude this training session for today. And to all the participants, you can join tomorrow's session using the same link which was used by today. So the same link can be used to connect for the rest of the 4 days of the training. So thank you very much again, and have a nice day to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. SR.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sir.